We welcome you back here to Open, and Daren Jaime here with you. I want to let you know about the Bronx Learning Lounge. It is a collective safe space for innovative educators and also allies of the Bronx and Harlem, as well as Lower Westchester, to actually share some resources and ideas that are enhancing their careers and professional lives, as well as fostering educational opportunities that support underserved communities. And joining us here to tell us a little bit more about the Learning Lounge, we are pleased to be joined by the CEO of the Bronx Learning Lounge, and we're glad to have Constance Barnes. And thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Good. So I guess the initial question is, why don't you introduce people who may not be so familiar with the Learning Lounge as to what the Learning Lounge is all about?
Sure. And Daren, I'm going to make sure that you insert the Bronx Learning Lounge because it
Yes.
is specifically the Bronx Learning Lounge. So I am by trade a New York City educator. I started teaching in Hunts Point a few years ago. And just a few. And I wanted to create a space for teachers like me who may have been thrown into the field, who didn't have a lot of resources, who were searching for other people who had the same ideas as them, wanted to challenge the status quo, needed some resources. And so I came up with this concept for the Bronx Learning Lounge. I am a graduate of the Communitas Accelerator Social Entrepreneur Program, where we learned how to hone in on our business skills and develop our ideas. So in November of 2019, I decided to launch the Bronx Learning Lounge, which combines an online community with in-person meetings so that teachers in those areas that you mentioned can get together. You know, we have a good brunch catered by Bascom Catering out of the Bronx, and we get together, we share ideas, we do some activities, we talk about the problems in our schools, and we collaborate on how to solve those problems.
Yeah. And so it's great for educators, right? But talk to us about this. What kind of challenges do you find the educators are having?
Sure. So one thing, educators are pretty siloed, right? You're in your school and
Right.
that's your community, that's your domain. Whereas there may be a school right next door, and if it's not necessarily your elementary school, your middle school, you don't necessarily know which practices are being shared, which strategies are working and being implemented. So the Bronx Learning Lounge is a place where people can come together so we're not so siloed. Another major issue for us, especially in the Bronx, and I know for me as a teacher, we don't have resources. There is funding for teachers, and I hope that the process is a little less convoluted than when I was a teacher, but it took a really long time just to get the small portion of the teacher resource fund. I'm sure it's probably called something else, but that money that the city gives you to buy supplies. By that time, you've already spent probably $1,000 of your own money to purchase certain things. And so for some charter schools, they may have a little bit more leeway and a little bit more funding to provide things for their teachers. But for most DOE teachers or teachers like in public schools in Yonkers and Mount Vernon, you are spending a lot of your own money to buy resources for your students and for your classroom to be successful. And then, of course, I'm sorry.
No, I said amazing because
Yeah.
I'm also thinking about, like, we're in New York City, this great
Mm-hmm.
metropolis. Why
Mm-hmm.
is it that we've got, the fact that teachers have to go into their pockets to actually continue to fund the
Mm-hmm.
classrooms that they provide? I just said
Mm-hmm.
amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And, there's tons of articles where that's a major factor for a lot of teachers deciding that they're going to leave. They spend so much because you're given basics, right? And even when you're given a curriculum, you find there are things you need to add to the curriculum to make it a really enriching, not just sage on the stage, I'm reading this book to your students, but a really enriching experience. So a lot of teachers who are creative find themselves spending a lot of money. I read an article maybe last month about a woman, and she said, like, in the first semester she spent $1,000. She was a brand new school teacher. She had no idea this was something she was going to have to do. And so one of the things we also want to do with the Bronx Learning Lounge is recycle or upcycle resources. So Daren, let's say you were teaching 8th grade last year and you have resources on the Constitution, and I'm now moving into 8th grade. If you're no longer using those, the Bronx Learning Lounge will be that conduit to say, Constance, there's some resources over here. Here's the medium for exchange. Go get those resources for Daren. So we've been asking teachers, educators, ex-principals. If you have things, give us the things and we'll recycle the things for you.
Mhm. And so having those resources available for a teacher itself, how valuable is that? Because sharing resources seems to also be this big problem, right? That
Hmm.
to have
Hmm.
access to resources, I think
Hmm.
on one side you got kids who are struggling to have supplies, and then
Right.
on the other side you got educators who are really struggling to have resources.
Exactly. So I remember when I started teaching, and I can clearly remember the teacher's name, Miss McConnell, Donna McConnell. If she's in the Bronx listening, thank you for all you did. But she was my next door teacher, and I was a brand new teacher at MS 201 in the Bronx. I just walked into the classroom. I had no supplies. And Donna came over and she said, here's some markers, here's some chalk, here's some white paper, here's this, here's that. And she gave me all of these things because I literally was standing there like, so what am I supposed to do with these kids for the
Right.
next 7 hours in the day? So it's really important to have that someone who, one, is willing to come and share supplies with you, but has the supplies to share. So again, that's one of the things that we try to foster, because as a new teacher, it is very intimidating to just be in a new school. You may not know anybody. So we provide that support system, just a network of teachers, former principals that you can connect with and talk to and say, I don't know what I'm doing in this room. Can somebody help me?
Mhm. So for people who want to get connected to you before we wrap up,
Mhm.
tell us how they can get connected to you.
Sure. You can find us on Facebook at the Bronx Learning Lounge. You can find us on Instagram at the Bronx Learning Lounge. And through either one of those mediums, you can easily connect to my website and find out about our next event.
Well, Constance, we want to thank you so much for being with us, sharing a little bit about the Bronx Learning Lounge. Glad to have you, and glad to have that resource available for educators. You know, sometimes we think educators have it all and know it all, but to
Mhm.
know that educators need some resources and you're providing that, thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All righty, Constance Barnes, our guest here, founder and CEO of the Bronx Learning Lounge. Listen, we do have more open coming up, so we want you to stay with us. We're going to come right back right after this.